Welcome to 20 Minute Tabletop, a podcast about board, card and miniature games. Tonight I'm joined by my co-host Kev, and we are going to be talking about board game design, designing the game from scratch. And the reason for that is because Kev is very, very interested in this topic, having worked for the last 4 years or so on a 10mm miniature solo board game called Decline. Okay, Kev, I want you to imagine that you are getting into a lift with the biggest board game publisher in the world, and you realise you've got 2 minutes to sell this game to me in terms of what is it. So let's see if you can give us a quick summary, maybe about a little bit about the theme, the story, the idea. What is Decline? Let's go.
So no pressure then, Tom, but I'll give it a go. The tagline of the game is Decline, 10mm solitaire adventure in a dying empire. And as the name suggests, it's 10mm miniatures, so way smaller than your average Games Workshop type offering. These are like the length of a finger joint. It's 10mm, 1 centimetre from the base to the eye line. And that was the first thing that attracted me to this kind of game design, that I just thought, wouldn't it be cool to find a use for all these 10mm miniatures that I've amassed over the years and maybe play out some kind of solitaire role-playing adventure with it. As a kid, I really liked Choose Your Own Adventure books. And then latterly, as I found games like Gloomhaven, Jaws of the Lion, I really enjoyed the compact nature of an adventure that you can play out on a desktop across a couple of pages. But one thing I didn't like was hex maps. I like the freedom of war game-like movement, moving in inches. And I also wanted to offer something a little bit different than just your usual hack and slash type dungeon crawl, where you just get a range of more difficult monsters as the game goes through. So I've tried to put a few more puzzly type experiences in there, maybe a few more challenges on character development, and maybe bring something a little bit different, all while scratching that board game design itch that I talked about the other week with Sam.
Awesome. I mean, that sounds really, really cool as an idea. It's funny that we should be talking about game design this week, because as I was browsing in the charity shops in Blandford, I found a really large and expensive textbook called The Art of Game Design by a person called Jesse Shell, who used to be a Disney Imagineer and I think has worked in both video and board game circles making games. And one of the things he describes about games is that there is something called a elemental tetrad, which are the 4 basic elements of a game. And he defines those as mechanics, story, the aesthetics, and technology that the game relies on to exist. So of those 4, Kev, which one do you want to talk about? Do you want to talk about game mechanics or the game aesthetics?
Well, that's really interesting. I've never actually heard of that concept, but those 4 things is pretty much how the game grew. So that is fascinating, to be honest. But it was absolutely the aesthetics that drew me to kind of the game design. It started off with wouldn't it be cool if I used 10mm miniatures? They look great. They've got a really old school sculpting style, a lot different than a lot of the STL type 3D printing offerings that are very sometimes over sculpted in my opinion. They've got that 1980s feel. They're just a fantastic artifact to have in your collection. And as it happens, I don't actually play any 10mm miniatures games. Yet I've bought all these 10mm miniatures just because they're cool. You can spray them up and paint tens of them in an hour or so to a pretty decent standard. So it was that really interested me. And then because I'd played games like Jaws of the Lion that I really enjoyed playing in a booklet type format, I thought, wow, let's create a map for these. That'd be a next cool thing. All without an idea of a game being present at any point. It was just, let's have a play around. Maybe I could do a tabletop battle type game. And it just grew and evolved from there, really. So from the miniatures are interested to then creating maps, that's what got me in. And the maps was, a whole undertaking as to itself.
So how did you go about making the art for the maps? Because that doesn't sound simple to me.
Well, I've got no knowledge. I'm not an expert. I'm certainly not a game designer, and I'm certainly not an artist, although I am, I suppose, a designer in that I run my business and I regularly create digital products and bring them to life as physical products.
If you don't mind me saying, though, you certainly are modest, because if you actually go and have a look at the maps that you've designed, they are really, really impressive, like genuinely impressive. and worth taking a look at.
Well, you wouldn't be saying that if you saw the ones from 3 years ago, Tom, because it's been a journey to say the least. And actually how I started, having absolutely no idea how to do this, that's very kind, by the way, thank you. A lot of it is down to the technology I've used rather than any kind of skill of my own. And I'll talk about that technology, because if you've ever been a dungeon master, you've got any interest in designing maps for any purpose, then you may have an interest in the actual technology side of it. But the way I first started was I live in the Peak District. 5 minutes from my front door, as you know, Tom, you visited me, you can be up on a hill in the middle of nowhere. And there's actually a video on my YouTube channel of me doing just that. I was walking around the hills on my own, filming the floor. Basically, I must look like a complete nutcase to other people on the hillside. But I was just taking pictures of, oh, there's a nice grass tuft. There's an interesting rock. Oh, this is a fascinating grass texture. And then bringing them home and trying to edit them into Photoshop. And I was creating these massive files in Photoshop, actual composites of photographs that I'd taken. And A, it was really time consuming. B, they looked pretty amateurish. I guess it was just too photorealistic. It was in that uncanny valley of it being a photograph, but also had some amount of editing, and it was just neither fish nor fowl, really. So I ended up going into loads of different, I've tried scores of different map softwares, but the two most interesting is one called Incarnate, I-N-K, Incarnate. It's a web app, it runs in Chrome, and you can draw out Dungeons and Dragons style maps. It's got all kinds of stamps, so you can put a stamp of some leaves or trees or maybe some buildings. You build it up in layers. And again, much better than the photographs I was taking, but still quite a skill. There's people who do Incarnate Patreons where they publish their maps for general consumption. You can effectively buy them, and they are amazing artists. And I actually did some stuff I was really happy with, but no exaggeration, they took me weeks to put together. And the reason why this project has gathered pace a lot recently is, even though I've been pretty happy with the game for a while, like I said, I've been doing it for 4 years, there's a piece of software that's really come from out of beta into a usable format called Dungeon Alchemist, and it's on Steam. And it's incredible. You kind of have a vision for a map. I sketch it out by hand, and then I recreate it in Dungeon Alchemist. And to give you an idea how powerful it is, you can drag out a grid of, say, a 10 by 5 room, choose the type of room you want. It might be a forest cabin, and press create, and then the thing will be generated, and you'll get a table and a rug and a fireplace and all the things that you might have in that environment in a matter of seconds. And it's got similar features for creating natural artifacts and terrain. And that has been an absolute game changer. It's taken this from something that's been in a folder on my desk getting worked on occasionally for the last 4 years to something that's gathered pace and is now effectively a product that you can get on our Patreon.
It's interesting to me that, I suppose, with the birth of AI and images generated by AI, it's going to get the entry level for doing this kind of thing is going to get lower and lower and lower, isn't it, for people? If they want to design things, it's going to be eventually at a click of a button, I imagine.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. I mean, if you've ever used an AI like Midjourney or ChatGPT now can even create digital artworks, it's incredible. For prototyping purposes, it's so easy. In fact, I still haven't quite worked out where I stand on the matter of AI art, because it's really polarizing. I don't know, have you seen any discussions of people's views on AI art in the game industry?
Well, some of my friends actually work in design and in generating artwork from scratch, really. So obviously that's a big threat to their industry. When you were talking earlier, Kev, about going around and taking photographs of attractive tufts of grass, it really did make me think of a period of poetry called the Romantic Poetry Movement, with people like William Wordsworth, who obviously ended up walking around the Lake District and noticing daffodils. And I quite like the fact that you are now kind of channeling that spirit of the sublime, the natural sublime, and appreciating quality grass tufts. And I will check out that video of you doing that on YouTube. And, you know, in a way, you might say it might make you look a little strange, but really that appreciation of the natural world, I suppose, has got a certain more authenticity, doesn't it, than pressing generate a bit of grass by AI. So I like it. I think the authenticity of that styling is a good thing, I think.
Well, I'll take that, Tom. You're definitely giving me way too much credit, because I'm just literally a nutcase who's walking around the hills taking photos of the floor. But I will absolutely take that artistic nod. But I really cross this decision point of, do I want to be using AI art or do I want to be commissioning art? Because in my job running tabletop upgrades, I create a lot of iconography. I fancy myself as a fairly skilled vector designer of creating logos, images, iconography that goes into games that I etch onto various tokens and measuring sets and things like that. So all that side of it has been no problem. And the card layout, the kind of graphic design of the rule book and stuff is very much within my wheelhouse. I can do it. But what I can't do is digital painted art. You know, the type of art that you might find on a Magic the Gathering card. I just don't have the skill to do it. And the way I have originally addressed that problem was I went onto Fiverr. If you've ever heard of that, it's like a freelancing website.
I have indeed, yeah.
And I found a character artist from Bolivia. And I paid her, it was about £50 per piece of character art that she created for me. And there was a sliding scale from kind of a very quick portrait for about £5 a head. I think she was massively underselling herself as well. She's an incredible artist. But for, a full-length digital art with the PSD, it was, I can't remember, between £50 and £80. And I got 3 or 4 of these done, which is obviously quite a lot of cost to a private individual who's got no hope of ever making this into a game, really. That's how I felt it. I just kind of got carried away and went down this rabbit hole. She created 4 pieces of art. But as I've gone on in the game, that is quite a big cost to meet. And there's a couple of bits. So, for example, in the game, I didn't want to have the typical hack and slash go through killing monsters. So in the first quest, you're in a dying empire. The game's called Decline. So you find yourself being hunted by some corrupt guards. You've got no chance of beating them. So the first level is basically to escape and equip. You're running around a map, trying to find some caches that your uncle's left, escape the guards, maybe do a little bit of damage to them, but just survive. And I had that piece of artwork done by the artist, and it's fantastic. That is actually on the character card for that enemy. I've got another 3 for the first 5 introductory quests, but as I've got nearer publishing this on Patreon, one of the wolves that are in the second quest, I didn't have artwork for, and I didn't really know whether I wanted to go with this character. So I actually did use Midjourney to generate some character art for this, because I'm a very visual person. I guess I could have just written wolf on a piece of paper, but I almost need to feel that it's a finished product. So I've got this kind of standing artwork, and it looks exactly the same style. I don't think the average person will be able to tell the difference. And I'm almost conflicted as to whether I should use this kind of thing. My instinct is no, but at one point, Cartwrights were, the pomp of technology, and they died out. I don't want the same to be for artists.
No, I agree. And I can understand why you'd want to support people and their income and the authenticity that comes with human design. But, I also understand that that's not the world we live in. I think, Kev, we ought to move on to mechanics and the gameplay. In the book that I'm reading about game design, there's a chapter called Game Mechanics Must Be in Balance. And Jesse Shell suggests that there are 12 ways that... 12 ways that you need to consider when you're balancing a game. And recently in the podcast with Sam, you did say, I think everybody's got a game in them. And I'm looking at this massive book and thinking that is not the case for me. Particularly, however, reading this is really interesting. So I've just picked out a few for you that I wanted to ask you about. And one of the things that you need to balance in a game, according to him, is things like meaningful choices. How do you balance the decisions that a player gets to make in the game? So, they can be decisions like, where should I go? How should I spend my resources? So what kind of choices have you balanced within the game for your player?
So unlike a lot of games of this type, it's not just kill the stuff. And I've made a bit of a feature of managing the character's mental health, the psyche. Throughout the game, you will be managing your resources, your energy, and it's done. Everyone knows what a fan of Malifaux I am. The game uses cards in a very Malifaux-like way of being able to influence the outcomes. Dice are used to resolve enemy actions just for speed, but I really enjoy the feeling of getting to choose the types of cards you're going to use and the effects that they'll have in the game. And those cards effectively represent your energy. And just like the real world, you can spend that energy to affect kind of changing your environment or changing yourself. That's the way I think. Quite often when I've had the most productive times of my life, I've, been absolutely tanked from a mental health perspective. So you've only got so much energy, and that's really what the game is. Yes, you're progressing through this world, killing monsters, trying to escape from things, solve puzzles, but it's also about the inner battle and trying to craft resources and manage your own health and mental space in order to be able to interact with the world.
So it's interesting that you mentioned dice, because another way that a game needs to be balanced is the balance between skill and chance.
Yeah, the chance is pretty much handled through dice and through card flips. Now, because it's a one-player game, we have an AI, but AI in the not true sense, in the automata sense. So the characters will need to know how to move. And when they haven't got a clear line of sight to you, they'll follow kind of a script, a little do this, then that type flowchart on the back of the card. And one of the things that they'll do if they can't see you is they've got a move called Prowl. And basically they'll resolve a movement in a random direction. And that changes depending on the types of creatures. So guards will move towards the last place they heard a noise, whereas a wild animal will kind of prowl around randomly. So I resolve that just through dice rolls, just because it's a nice, quick, easy way to deal with it. But anything where you get to interact with the game, I try to do it through the cards, because then you're always got that satisfying, I've only got so many resources, I've only got so many cards, I can spend them to do stuff, or I can save them to maybe save myself later on when something's attacking me.
I am fascinated by this book, and the more I look into it, the more I want to ask you about it. One of the other things that it says you need to balance is rewards for players. And the example it gives in the book is, they say Nintendo games, for example, are really good at giving you praise. And often that will happen through animations and music. But all games will give you rewards as you go through. And I realised, having read this, that when I'm playing Ark Nova and you get halfway through the game and you get to upgrade a card, then that feels amazing. And some of the rewards are prolonged play, I suppose, or powers, or the reward of completion. So, where's the fun coming from in your game, I suppose, is what I'm asking. What kind of rewards have you built in for players?
So in this first quest, for example, you're basically marauding around this map trying to dig up caches, and there's a little mini game where you're using the cards, your resources and energy, to unlock combination locks, which are effectively a sequence of 3 cards. So I've tried not to just beat the monsters up. So every time you unlock one of these chests, you will be rewarded with items that you can use immediately in the game, because there is definitely something about being able to use something there and then. And I've kind of tapered the quest so that it's quite difficult to pass the quest, but if you're, really feeling it, or it's going well, or you just like a challenge, you can push on through for something really good at the end of it, an extra special item or resource, but the chances are you're probably going to die if you do it. So I haven't done an easy, normal, hard mode kind of thing. It's kind of built into the way the quests are set up.
Okay, and it's a nice segue actually to be talking about rewards, really, because you've set up a Patreon for this podcast, which we're hoping that people will at least go and have a look at. We've got different levels of rewards, haven't we, for people who do that, and at all levels you get the Decline miniatures game. At what state of completion is that, Kev? Is it playable? How playable is it at this stage?
Yeah, it's playable, but also, I've got some hubris here because I'm not a professional game designer. I'm a professional manufacturer of gaming accessories, but a fully fledged game designer I am not. And to be honest, if I'd have seen that book before I'd started trying to design this game, I would have been scared off big time. I thought, I am not worthy of doing this. This is a professional endeavor that I'm not fit to take part in. But just playing has brought this game to life. And like I said, 4 years this has been in development. And a lot of the time of that development has been it just sitting in a folder because it didn't look very good. And only recently it started to come to fruition. And that it's a nice finished product. The graphic design is, spot on, if I do say so myself. It's looking nice and playable. So the way I've done it is I want everyone to be able to play this game. I'm not, for goodness sake, charging people to have a go at effectively my prototype game. So on the free level of the Patreon, you can get the files and you can play the game. The way I've kind of staggered it is if you really want to support us and you back any of the levels, we've got 3 levels, you can download high-res colour versions of the files so that will print out nicely and you'll get a little bit more behind the scenes type stuff, and you'll get input on the game. But if you just want to download it and play it, just join our Patreon for free, and you can download it. It might not look the best if you print it out, but you can probably play it in a web browser, a virtual tabletop. So yeah, but it's absolutely playable. And the way I'm doing this is the first pack is the living rule book, the first quest, and all the cards and things that you need to make the game playable. So yeah, you can absolutely play it from day one, just from the free level. The paid levels, like say, have the high res color stuff and a little bit more of the background, but you've also got all the fluff and the fiction and things that I've tried to come up with.
You're very quick to say you're not a game designer, but you are somebody that loves games and has had a lot of experience of playing a lot of games. So I don't think this game would be out there if you didn't have at least some strong confidence that it is at least playable and entertaining. Kev, is that fair to say?
I think so. But, my wife's uncle is an artist, and he's always said, anyone could be an artist. You've just got to say you are. It's the confidence to put your work out there. And it's been the same with this, really. I mean, I struggle with that idea that I'm a game designer. I don't feel like it, but this is a playable game that I really enjoy and other people have also enjoyed. So I guess maybe there is something in it. But yeah, I enjoy it. I think it's very different to the stuff that I've played in the past. It uses 10mm miniatures, which are super cool. You just don't see them used in skirmish. And it's an interesting challenge. It's something that you don't need to spend ages setting up. You open the booklet and you're away.
It's interesting. Since we recorded the podcast on Colorscapes with Sam, that game has been picked up by a member of our Discord server called Neil, who you might remember from the UK Games Expo podcast, who's really into his coding. And he's actually has put that game out in alpha mode, so it's going to be playable on Board Game Arena, should any of you want to check it out. Would that be a viable option for Decline, do you think, Kev?
I don't see why not, although there are a lot of assets in the game, so I suppose it would be in a constant state of flux, so it'd just be committing to something that would take a lot of maintenance, I guess. But yeah, a lot of games are playable online, but I think the real joy of tabletop games for me is the artifacts, and I don't think you get cooler artifacts than little 10mm miniatures. I'm just playing with them now. They're so satisfying.
Okay, so we probably need to wrap up there, and hopefully, having listened to us talk about that game for a little bit, you'll at least take a little click and have a look at the Patreon and maybe have a check out of Kev's game. But you just run us through the tiers on the Patreon quickly.
Yeah, you can join from free if you just want to follow along, get a little bit of news about the podcast. You can access the Decline rulebook and the kind of low-res files that you can have a bit of a play around with. And if that tickles your fancy, we've got a paid level where you can support the podcast and all the costs that we have in delivering this to you. And if you back any of the levels, then you'll get the high-res files to print out all the beautiful artwork. And then there's a couple of extra bits that are related to my business. I have a digital product line called Foldscapes, which are pop-up scenery for your miniature war games. So print them out, stick them together, and they're much like a child's book, really simple to put together. You push them out and you've got a village that sets up on your tabletop in a matter of seconds. So we've got tiers for the Foldscapes Fantasy and Foldscapes Futures, and whatever you back, you'll get a copy of the full Decline rules and artwork. And if you don't want to support us, you're not able to support us at the moment, no problem. We're just happy to have you. And you can join the Patreon for free, and you'll get access to the news and also the low-res files for Decline.
Yeah, and please do join us in our Discord if you want to chat about anything. It's really good to meet people there. And Kev, have you got some videos of the Foldscapes products? Because I have seen one or two that you've made, and they are wizardry, really. There's a flat piece of paper that, after a couple of folds, turns into a barn.
Yeah, that's all on my YouTube, Tabletop Upgrades YouTube. We'll bang some links in the show notes. But yes, they are very satisfying and very easy to put together and look really professional. So yeah, check all that out. But thank you for listening today, and we hope you enjoyed the podcast.